The Gilded Cage of Guanajuato, a prelude to horror. Guanajuato, Mexico, a city of winding alleys, of vibrant colors. Colonial architecture that speaks of a rich history. It's beautiful, undeniably. Tourists flock here, they see the charm, they hear the music of the mariachis, but beneath this picturesque surface, a darkness once festered, a secret so vile it chills the soul. This isn't just a story, it's a warning, a truth more horrifying than any fiction. This tale isn't about a lone, deranged killer. No, this was organized, methodical, a criminal enterprise built on suffering, and at its helm, not hardened male gangsters, but women, sisters in fact, the Gonzalez Valenzuela sisters. Their names would soon become a byword for evil, a chilling chapter in Mexico's history, one that many would prefer to forget, but forgetting is a luxury we can't afford. Meet the matriarchs of malice, the Gonzalez sisters. Who were these women? These architects of agony? Delfina, Maria de Jesus, Carmen, and Maria Luisa, the Gonzalez Valenzuela sisters. They weren't born into infamy, they grew up in San Francisco del Rincon, a small town in Guanajuato state. An ordinary place, you might think, but something twisted within them, or perhaps society twisted them. The answer is elusive. Delfina, the eldest, was often described as the iron fist, the dominant force. She was the one who allegedly set the brutal tone. Maria de Jesus, her partner in many of the businesses. Carmen and Maria Luisa, also deeply involved. Together they were a formidable, terrifying unit. Bound by blood, and by shared dark secrets, they built an empire. The Devil's Playground, Loma del Angel and beyond. Their operations weren't confined to a single hidden lair. They had a network, several properties, brothels scattered across Guanajuato and Jalisco, places like La Barca de Oro and El Puente, innocuous names for dens of despair. But one location would become infamous, Rancho El Angel, also known as Loma del Angel, near Guanajuato City. This was a central hub. Here and at other sites the sisters refined their cruel craft. They weren't just running brothels anymore. They were managing human trafficking rings. They were imprisoning women, forcing them into servitude. The facade was often one of legitimate business, a restaurant, a small hotel. But behind that thin veneer, a different reality unfolded, a brutal, captive existence for countless young women. The choice of locations was strategic. Whispers of work, echoes of entrapment, the luring. How did so many fall into their clutches? The answer is depressingly simple: deception. Las Poquianchis and their network of recruiters preyed on hope. They targeted young women, often teenagers, from impoverished rural families, girls dreaming of a better life, of escaping grinding poverty, of sending money back home. They were ripe for the picking. The promises were always alluring. Good jobs as domestic servants in wealthy households, waitressing positions with generous pay, a chance to move to the city, to find opportunity. Recruiters, sometimes women who had themselves been victims, were sent into villages. They were persuasive. They understood the desires of these young women. They painted a picture of a bright future, a future that was a lie. Once a girl agreed, she would be transported, often far from her home. Section 5. Inside the Inferno, a reign of unspeakable terror. Life inside the Poquianchis establishments was a relentless cycle of abuse. The women were forced into prostitution, serving countless men day and night. Their earnings were confiscated, their bodies treated as commodities to be used and discarded. Any sign of defiance, any hesitation was met with swift and brutal punishment. Fear was the air they breathed. Beatings were a daily occurrence, with fists, with whips, with whatever objects were at hand. Starvation was another tool of control. The women were kept weak, malnourished, barely able to resist. Hygiene was non-existent, disease spread rampantly. Medical care was a cruel joke, or worse, a source of further trauma. The sisters, or their enforcers, ruled with absolute terrifying power. Section 6. The first cracks in the facade, a sister's desperate plea. For years, this empire of horror operated with chilling efficiency. Rumors undoubtedly swirled. disappearances of young women from villages, whispers from men who frequented the brothels. But these whispers rarely reached the ears of those who could or would act. Were authorities complicit, paid off, or simply indifferent to the plight of poor, marginalized women? It's a question that still echoes. The system was designed to silence. Victims were isolated, terrified, conditioned to believe there was no escape, no one to turn to. The sisters were powerful, connected, some said. Who would dare challenge them? Who would believe the ravings of a fallen woman against respected business owners? This wall of silence seemed impenetrable for a long, long time. But even the most carefully constructed walls can develop cracks. Sometimes it takes just one person, one act of desperation or courage. In this case, the catalyst appears to have been a young woman named Catalina Ortega. She was allegedly being held by one of the sisters. Section 7. The Unearthing of Hell Discovery at Rancho El Angel. In January 1964, the authorities finally acted decisively. They raided Rancho El Angel, also known as Loma del Angel, near Guanajuato. What they found was beyond their darkest imaginings. It was a scene from a nightmare. Dozens of women and girls, emaciated, ill, terrified, held in deplorable conditions, their eyes reflecting years of trauma, the air thick with despair. As the survivors began to speak, their stories painted a picture of unimaginable cruelty, tales of forced labor, of constant beatings, of sexual slavery, of witnessing murders, of babies being killed. The police listened, horrified. The initial raid was just the beginning. The true extent of the horror was yet to be fully uncovered. It lay beneath the very ground they stood on. The search of the property began, and soon the digging. Investigators started unearthing bodies, one after another, shallow graves, hidden pits, the remains of young women, of infants. Section 8. The Scales of Justice Trial and a Nation's Outrage. The arrest of Delfina, Maria de Jesus, Carmen, and Maria Luisa Gonzalez Valenzuela sent shockwaves across Mexico. Their enforcers were also rounded up. The public, gripped by a mixture of horror and fascination, demanded swift justice. The trial became a national sensation. Every gruesome detail was reported, every testimony scrutinized. The country was holding its breath. In court, survivors bravely recounted their ordeals. Their voices, though often trembling, exposed the depths of the sisters' depravity. They spoke of the constant fear, the systematic abuse, the murders they witnessed. The defense attorneys tried to deflect blame, to portray the sisters as mere businesswomen unaware of the extremes, or to shift responsibility onto their hired help. Few were convinced. The evidence, both testimonial and forensic, was damning. The sheer number of bodies discovered, the consistency of the survivors' accounts. It painted an undeniable picture of a sophisticated criminal organization, one that dealt in human lives with chilling indifference. The sisters themselves remained largely stoic. Section 9. A Permanent Stain. The Dark Legacy of Las Poquianchis. The case of Las Poquianchis did more than just expose a horrific crime ring. It ripped a scar across the psyche of Mexico. It forced a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about poverty, about vulnerability, about the ease with which evil can flourish in the shadows, if condoned by indifference, or protected by corruption. The nation was forever changed. The term Poquianchis embedded itself deep within Mexican vernacular. It became a synonym for ultimate evil, for monstrous cruelty, especially cruelty inflicted by women. It's a name invoked to describe the worst of humanity. A chilling shorthand for a chapter many wish to forget. But forgetting is not an option. Not when the lessons are so stark, so vital. The story has been retold countless times, in books, in films like Jorge Casal's Las Poquianchis, 1976. Please comment, subscribe, and share this video to support our channel.